The galaxy had many laws, etched into treaties, carved into stone, and sworn in blood. But among them all, one stood above the rest, carried not by governments or empires, but by fear itself. Terran space is forbidden. No edict declared it. No council enforced it. The rule survived in whispers, muted warnings passed between star captains, carved into the songs of traders, etched into the silence of old navigational maps where whole sectors lay dark. Those who crossed the boundary never returned. Fleets, proud, vast, armed with the finest weapons the galaxy could build, had vanished into the Terran void. Not wreckage. Not distress calls. Nothing but the echo of silence, as if the stars themselves had devoured them whole. Some said the Terrans were extinct, shadows of an age long buried. Others claimed they had sealed themselves away, content to be forgotten. And yet, beneath every theory lingered the same truth: Terran space was not empty. It was watching. For centuries, the galaxy obeyed this unspoken command. But arrogance is a poison, and empires rarely heed warnings written in silence. The Celestian Empire, the largest, most unyielding force in known space, laughed at the old tales. They had conquered thousands of worlds, ground rebellions into ash, and bent ancient civilizations to their will. To them, humanity was a ghost, a myth to frighten smugglers. And myths could not stand against the will of an empire. So, under banners of fire and gold, the Imperial Armada gathered. 10,000 warships, gleaming in the starlight, engines thundering with the weight of conquest. An emperor, draped in arrogance, decreed their mission simple: cross the forbidden line, claim the Terran systems, and prove to the galaxy that no shadow, no whisper, no ancient fear could halt the march of his dominion. But the stars had grown still. Too still. As if the void itself waited in silence, holding its breath. The moment the Empire crossed that invisible border, the fate of thousands was sealed. The warnings were not superstition. They were prophecy. And the prophecy was about to be fulfilled. The Celestian Armada stretched across the void like a field of stars unto itself, a mechanical constellation bound not by gravity but by pride. Their hulls shimmered with golden crests, their cannons gleamed under the cold glare of starlight. 10,000 ships moved as one, a tide of steel and fury, carrying with them the will of an emperor who had never heard the word no without punishing it in blood. From the Imperial flagship's solar ascendant, High Admiral Kale Vorath stood upon the command dais, hands clasped behind his back. Before him, an ocean of holographic stars marked their approach. At the far edge of the map burned a single, faint line. Not a natural border. Not a frontier. But a line nonetheless, drawn not by maps but by fear. Beyond it, Terran space. "High Admiral," murmured his adjutant, his voice hushed though the bridge buzzed with activity, "the council envoy requests an audience again. She insists it is urgent." Voratha's jaw tightened. He had allowed the envoy aboard only to humor the Emperor's diplomatic formalities. He knew what she would say: the same tired warnings passed like superstitions among lesser species. He gave a curt nod. The great doors slid open, and the envoy entered. She was no imperial subject, her robes were woven in the pale silver threads of the council, her face lined with the weight of history. Her eyes burned with something Vorath did not recognize at first. Was it fear, or pity? "You must not do this," she said without bowing, her voice carrying across the command chamber like a blade. "Terran space is forbidden. Do not mistake this warning for diplomacy, it is survival." The crew stilled. Some turned to listen, though no one dared meet the Admiral's eye. Vorath allowed himself a thin smile, more scorn than amusement. "Forbidden by whom? Your council? Or the whispers of smugglers and cowards too afraid of old ghost stories?" "By the Terrans themselves," the envoy said. "By what they left behind. You do not understand the silence you mock. The fleets that cross that line do not return because they are not permitted to. Not by chance. By design. Her words landed heavy, but Vorith chuckled, shaking his head. The Empire does not bow to phantoms. Humanity, if it still exists, is nothing but a relic of a forgotten war. If they live, they will kneel. If they resist, they will burn. The envoy's expression darkened. You are not the first to believe that. You will not be the last. But you may yet choose not to join the silence. Voritha's hand cut the air. Remove her from my bridge. As the guards escorted her out, she turned once more, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the hum of engines. Then your silence will be the next warning. The doors sealed, and with them the last note of hesitation. Vorith straightened, eyes fixed on the starlit border. Signal the fleet. Advance. The void seemed to tremble as the armada crossed the line. Thousands of drives flared, their light reflecting off endless hulls. The boundary held no physical marker, no beacon or outpost, yet every officer, every crewman, felt the shift. As if stepping into a cathedral where the air itself carried judgment. Status reports, Vorith demanded. Fleet cohesion intact. Formations holding. No resistance detected. No resistance. No sign of life. Only the emptiness of space, vast and unyielding. And then, flickers. Sir, called a sensor officer, brows furrowed. Unidentified signatures on the fringe. Small, erratic. Gone now. Vorith frowned. Ghost returns. Increase scan resolution. Moments later, another officer spoke. Contact. Bearing 329. Multiple vessels, closing fast. The bridge came alive with energy. Screens lit with sharp red indicators as a cluster of ships emerged from the void. At first glance, they seemed unimpressive, dark, angular craft, their hulls worn and scarred as though dredged from forgotten battlefields. Compared to the shining Imperial Armada, they looked almost obsolete. Vorith sneered. So this is the Terran fleet? Rust and shadow? Prepare firing solutions. Let history record that the first blow was ours. Across the fleet, batteries primed, cannons hummed with power, missile bays unlocked. A single gesture from Vorith unleashed the storm. 1,000 lances of plasma fire and missile trails streaked through the void, converging on the Terran ships. Explosions bloomed, yet not as they expected. The Terran craft moved. Not in evasive maneuvers, but in ways that bent comprehension. They shifted positions before Imperial targeting even aligned, as if they knew where the fire would fall. Shots that should have vaporized them instead tore through emptiness. The few that connected fizzled against shields that flared and folded like layers of light itself. And then the Terrans answered. No thunder. No blaze of color. Just silence, and Imperial ships began to die. A frigate at the vanguard fractured cleanly in half, its pieces drifting apart without explosion, as though cut by an invisible blade. A cruiser lit briefly with internal fire before collapsing into itself, its hull twisting inward until it vanished in a silent implosion. Entire wings lost cohesion in seconds, consumed not by overwhelming barrages but by surgical strikes, each one perfect, precise, merciless. Impossible, muttered one of Voritha's lieutenants, his hands shaking over the console. Our shields didn't even register an impact. Maintain formation. Vorith barked, though his own heart hammered. Overwhelm them with numbers. But numbers meant nothing. 10 Terran vessels danced through the void like predators among prey, cutting apart ships thrice their size. Where the Empire fired in rage, the Terrans answered with inevitability. On the bridge, alarms screamed as one of the fleet's destroyers burst into a storm of molten shards. Vorith gripped the railing, his voice strained. How many ships lost? The answer came like a hammer. 33, sir. In under 3 minutes. Silence rippled through the command crew. The Empire's might, reduced so swiftly by what had appeared to be nothing more than scraps of a forgotten war machine. Voratha's eyes narrowed, jaw set. Fear coiled in his chest, but he smothered it beneath fury. Signal the Emperor. Tell him the Terrans exist. And tell him, we will break them. But as the comms officer tried to send the message, only static filled the channel. The Emperor's stars were too far to hear them now. Somewhere in the darkness beyond their scanners, more echoes began to stir. Not 10 ships this time. Hundreds. The Terrans were not merely defending. They were awakening. The void was no longer silent. It listened. Every Imperial vessel still burning through Terran space could feel it, though none dared name it aloud. Something vast and ancient lingered in the darkness, unseen yet suffocating. A presence that weighed on the mind as much as the hull. For the first time in centuries, Imperial officers, heirs of conquest, veterans of countless campaigns, felt the cold bite of fear. High Admiral Vorath gripped the railing of the Solar Ascendant's command deck, knuckles white beneath the golden trim of his gloves. The reports came in like knives, ships gone, captains screaming into silence, formations shattered as if the Terrans had mapped their every move before they'd made them. Status, Vorath demanded, his voice steady though his heart thundered. Losses at 67 vessels confirmed, came the reply. Dozens more crippled. Their weapons, if that's what they are, cut straight through our defenses. It's not like anything in the database. Identify it. Compare it to anything, anything. The sensor chief shook his head, sweat beading his brow. I can't. It's like, they're not firing through space, Admiral. They're rewriting it around us. A murmur rippled across the deck. One word hissed in the silence, impossible. Vorath silenced them with a glare. The Empire has faced weapons beyond comprehension before. We endure. We conquer. Yet even as he spoke, the bridge trembled. Alarms shrieked as another battleship winked out on the display, snuffed like a candle. No fire, no wreckage. Just gone. Sir, cried the comms officer. The luminous dawn, its captain reports being locked. They can't jump. Engines unresponsive. The transmission cut in a scream. On the display, the battleship folded in on itself, compressed to a pinprick before vanishing entirely. A hush fell. The crew stared at the space where thousands of lives had been moments before. Voratha's jaw clenched. He had commanded wars across galaxies, crushed insurrections, even burned entire biospheres to ash. But never, never, had he faced an enemy that killed not in battle, but in judgment. Admiral, said his adjutant quietly, we should retreat. Now. Voratha's eyes snapped to him. Retreat? To admit weakness? To crawl back across the line and confess to the Emperor that the myths were true? His pride bristled, but pride could not silence the screams echoing through the comms. Before he could respond, the lights flickered. Systems dimmed. Across the fleet, ships shuddered as if under a single invisible hand. The sensor chief's voice broke. They're inside our systems. How? Vorath barked. I don't know. It's not hacking, it's anticipation. They know where we'll reroute power before we do. On the outer displays, the Terran vessels moved again. This time, they were not 10. Nor 100. Hundreds of contacts emerged from the void, their hulls vast, black silhouettes bristling with quiet menace. Some were so immense they seemed like floating cities, cathedral-like titans with hulls carved in solemn geometry, as if made for war and mourning alike. They advanced without hurry, without hesitation. They did not posture. They did not threaten. They simply moved forward with inevitability. Voratha's breath caught. Gods preserve us. But gods did not answer. Only the Terrans. Panic spread across the armada. Officers shouted, formations fractured, squadrons broke ranks in desperate attempts to flee. Some ships fired blindly into the dark, weapons flaring uselessly against the void. The Terrans did not rush. They hunted. A lone Imperial frigate fled on full burn, engines flaring white-hot. For a moment, it seemed it might slip the noose, until a Terran ship appeared from nowhere, directly in its path, as though it had been waiting there all along. A single pulse of light, and the frigate's drive core froze solid, extinguished mid-burn. It drifted helplessly, caught like prey in the jaws of a trap. Another cruiser, its captain bold enough to charge, fired a full broadside at close range. Plasma bolts and missiles tore into the Terran warship, and disappeared, absorbed into rippling void around its hull. The Terran vessel responded with a lance of nothingness that erased the cruiser's bridge in an instant, leaving the rest of the ship eerily intact, dead and drifting. Across the fleet, scene after scene repeated. No matter the tactic, retreat, attack, scatter, every Imperial move was anticipated, countered, undone. The Armada was not at war. It was being culled. On the bridge of the Solar Ascendant, Voreth watched in growing horror. His comms officer gasped suddenly. "Admiral, new transmission incoming. It's from Imperial Command." Relief surged through the crew. Perhaps reinforcements, perhaps guidance from the Emperor himself. "On screen," Voreth ordered. The Emperor's face filled the display, proud and cold beneath his crown of stars. His voice was calm, detached, regal. "To the Armada of the Celestian Empire, you have entered forbidden space and met the fate of those who trespass. You will receive no reinforcements. No rescue. You are to fight until you are extinguished, that the galaxy may know Imperial will does not falter." The crew froze. Voreth felt his blood run cold. Abandoned. The Emperor's eyes bored into them through the transmission. "You are martyrs now. Die well." The message cut. For a moment, silence reigned. Then rage erupted. Officers cursed, some wept, some slammed fists against consoles. The Empire had already written them off, their names erased, their sacrifice framed as loyalty instead of betrayal. Voreth stood rigid, though his chest burned. He had served the Empire his entire life, bled for it, commanded victories in its name. And now, cast aside like refuse. His adjutant whispered, almost pleading, "Admiral, we're not soldiers anymore. We're prey." Voreth turned his gaze back to the looming Terran fleet. The hunters had awakened, and they would not stop. The Empire's arrogance had brought them here. Now, only silence would take them away. And in that silence, Voreth finally understood the warning. The void held them fast. Imperial ships drifted like broken shards of pride, scattered across Terran space. The golden banners of the Celestian Armada, once symbols of invincible conquest, now fluttered as little more than debris, glowing embers among the ruins. On the Solar Ascendant's bridge, the air was thick with despair. Officers moved like shadows, their voices muted, their eyes hollow. Reports of destruction no longer shocked, they were expected. Every minute brought the death of another squadron, another 1,000 lives consumed by the quiet precision of the Terrans. High Admiral Voreth stared at the tactical display. It no longer showed formations or strategies, only a map of inevitability. Terran vessels encircled them with mathematical perfection, each movement a tightening noose. "They're not even rushing to end us," whispered the sensor chief, trembling. "They could destroy us all at once. But they're choosing. One ship at a time." Voreth knew the truth, this was not battle. It was judgment. "Admiral," the comms officer called suddenly, voice cracking. "Incoming transmission. It's not from the Empire. It's them." The bridge fell silent. Voreth's throat tightened. On screen. For the first time, the Terrans revealed themselves. The display filled with the image of a figure, a human, or something close enough to be mistaken for one. Clad in dark armor traced with pale lines of light, their eyes glowed faintly, not with anger, but with a stillness that froze the soul. When they spoke, their voice was calm, resonant, and merciless. Terran space is forbidden. You were warned. No threat. No demand. Just truth. The transmission cut. Some officers broke then, dropping to their knees, whispering prayers to gods that had abandoned them. Others screamed, slamming fists into unresponsive consoles. But Voreth only stood still, the weight of realization pressing upon him like gravity. This was not about conquest, nor rebellion. This was about trespass. They had crossed into a place where survival was not permitted. And now the sentence was being carried out. The Terran struck. Not in a wave, but in silence. Ships winked out one by one, erased with chilling precision. A destroyer attempted a blind hyperspace jump, only to snap back into normal space, engines shredded as though reality itself rejected its flight. A carrier unleashed its full fighter wing, hundreds of craft burning bright across the void, only for a Terran warship to pulse once, and every fighter fell dark, drifting like lifeless motes. The Solar Ascendant shuddered as nearby cruisers detonated in eerie implosions, their shockwaves rippling against its shields. The screams of dying crews echoed through open comm channels, cut short one by one. "Admiral," cried his adjutant. "We can't win. We can't fight them." "I know," Voreth said quietly. His voice was steady now, stripped of pride, of rage. Only clarity remained. "But we will not die crawling." He turned to his officers, meeting their terrified eyes. "Arm every cannon. Ready every missile. If we are to fall, then let the Terrans remember we face them with fire, not silence." The crew hesitated, then obeyed. The Solar Ascendant roared to life, its arsenal blazing, weapons discharging in a storm of fury. Across the fleet, surviving ships followed suit, unleashing everything they had left. The void lit with imperial wrath. Plasma flares, missile trails, kinetic slugs, all converged upon the advancing Terran vessels. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed aflame. But the Terrans did not flinch. Their cathedral-like warships absorbed the storm, rippling with impossible defenses. Then, with calm inevitability, they answered. One by one, Imperial ships fell silent. The Solar Ascendant trembled as its sister battleships vanished around it, consumed by lances of void fire and impossible geometries. Voreth held the railing as the deck shook beneath him, alarmed screaming. Panels burst in sparks, smoke filling the air. Shields collapsing, the chief engineer shouted. Voreth stood tall, his eyes locked on the looming Terran warship ahead. Its hull stretched like a city of steel and shadow, its silent guns aimed directly at them. For an instant, he thought he saw figures, humans, standing upon its bridge, watching without expression, without mercy. He whispered, more to himself than to his crew, "So this is the truth of the myths." And then the void consumed them. Light returned only on the far side of the galaxy, in the throne chamber of the Celestian Emperor. He awaited reports of victory, certain his armada would carve legend from shadow. But no reports came. No triumphant declarations. Only silence. For hours, he demanded answers. For hours, his courtiers and strategists scrambled through channels, their eyes growing wide with dread. At last, they realized what the galaxy had always known. The Emperor's Grand Armada, the pride of his reign, was gone. Erased as if it had never existed. Whispers spread. First in shadows, then in corridors, then across worlds. The truth could not be hidden. Terran space was forbidden. The Empire had tested that law, and been shattered. And so, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy trembled not at the Emperor's wrath, but at the silence beyond Terran borders. Deep within that silence, the Terran fleet returned to its vigil. No cheers. No celebration. Only the unbroken stillness of sentinels who had once been forgotten, now remembered in terror. They sent no message to the galaxy, no declaration of power. They did not need to. The ruins of the Armada were message enough. Terran space was not defended by walls or treaties. It was defended by inevitability. To enter was to die. And so the silence remained. Eternal. Unbroken. Absolute.